This is Sky News at 4, the top stories. Theresa May under renewed pressure from senior Conservatives to scrap the public sector pay cap. Fishing deal cast away, the UK pulls out of an international agreement allowing other countries to trawl our waters. Illegal subletters will not face prosecution if they help identify Grenfell Tower victims. France's president calls on African leaders to join forces to take on terrorists, thugs and murderers. Time to turn back on the taps, calls for drinking fountains across the country to spurt back into life.
Britain's Andy Murray and Johanna Konta say they will play at Wimbledon despite minor injuries. And Sean O'Brien is cleared to play in the Lions' deciding test match against the All Blacks next weekend.
Good afternoon to you. Theresa May is coming under increasing pressure from within her own party to ease the government's austerity measures and lift the public sector pay cap. Environment Secretary Michael Gove is the latest cabinet member to urge the Prime Minister to reconsider, saying the government should listen to independent bodies that review pay and accept their findings.
These pay review bodies have been set up in order to ensure that we can have authoritative advice. John earlier is that we should respect the integrity of the process.
Well, earlier on, Alex Kenny, an executive member of the National Union of Teachers, told Sky News that young teachers in particular are being affected.
The real issue is the way it's affecting younger teachers coming into the job, where those words are.
Well, we're joined now by the Conservative MP and former NHS Lewis. I have to say, it looks absolutely beautiful there this afternoon. First question for you. You've worked in the public sector yourself. Do you think it's time now for a pay sector rise?
Yeah, no, I absolutely do, and I raised this in my speech in the debate this week in Parliament, because we've had 7 years of a pay freeze, and particularly in nursing, which is my background, there's no real definite end in sight, and so people were prepared to put up with that for a little while, but actually 7 years into it, nurses are starting to struggle, and I think that's why we're starting to see large numbers of vacancies in the professions, because people need to be able to eat, to be able to pay their bills, look after their growing families. And it's getting increasingly harder. So I think a pay freeze coming to an end, I think, has to be inevitable.
And Theresa May, she's under a lot of pressure, but do you think she's going to bow to that?
Well, I think there seems to be a feeling amongst colleagues that this is being looked at seriously now. Obviously, we do need to look at the independent pay review body recommendations and look at those. But for me, in nursing in particular, it isn't just about the pay cap. For me, I was getting increasingly frustrated as a nurse that our pay structure wasn't right. It cannot be right that a nurse in the NHS earns on average about £26,000 a year when every shift nurses are making life and death decisions. But an NHS manager, for example, will earn on average £45,000 a year and a senior manager £75,000 a year. So for me, it's more than just about the pay freeze. It's also about the pay structure. If we are serious about rewarding nurses, we need to reward them with pay as well.
So why did you vote against Labour's amendment?
Well, see, there is some confusion over this. So the Labour amendment was about amending the Queen's speech, which was really the agenda for the next 2 years for this government. The pay review is already on the agenda. It's likely to be voted on in the budget, and Labour knew this. They weren't really interested in ending a pay freeze for public sector workers. They wanted to bring down the government and for the Queen's speech to fail. So people, obviously have heard that the pay freeze was in the votes this week. Actually, the vote, if we all voted in favour of that last week, the pay freeze would not be lifted and the cap would not have been lifted. So that was about Labour trying to bring down the government. We're serious about trying to address public sector workers' pay, and that will be addressed most likely in the budget, and the work that's being done now is really important to inform those decisions going forward.
And how about funding for schools? Because I've heard lots of them say that they believe funding is in crisis. Surely more money has to be put in there.
Well, certainly here in East Sussex, we've been underfunded from our schools for decades because we're seen as a rural authority. So we've never been well funded compared to urban authorities like next door in Brighton and Hove or in London. And so I've been campaigning for quite a while, since becoming an MP in 2015, to address the school fundings issue. The government, to be fair, have put record levels of funding into education, but because the pupil numbers are growing, that's going being used more sparsely time and time again. So It's not that the money isn't going in, but the per pupil funding needs to be addressed. And certainly, again, when I've met with the Secretary of State, we've heard positive moves on that. And I think that she is making representation to Treasury to say, you know, I've got great schools, I've got good and outstanding schools in my constituency, but teachers need the funding to make that continue. So, you know, I certainly am supporting my local schools and the funding issues that they are facing.
OK, very quick question for you. It's been nearly a month now since that snap election. Can Theresa May hang on, or do you think it's time for a new leader of the Conservative Party?
No, I think she absolutely can hang on. I think, you know, we only saw Prime Minister's questions last week. She did a fantastic job in standing up for the country. And I think, you know, she's got a tough job to do with Brexit negotiations going forward. So for me, it's really crucial that she stays there and gets the job done.
OK, Maria Caulfield, thank you very much for your time this afternoon. Now, the government is pulling the UK out of a deal which allows some foreign countries to fish in British waters. It's scrapping the London Fisheries Convention, which was signed in 1964, even before it's negotiated our exit from the European Union. Well, the convention... the Netherlands, France, Germany and Belgium to fish within 6 to 12 nautical miles of our coastline, and for our ships to do the same in their waters. Well, it sits alongside the EU's common fisheries policy, where all European members can fish between 12 and 200 miles of the UK, but also sets quotas on how much they can actually catch. Well, earlier on, the Environment Minister told Sky News just why Britain wants to pull out of the convention.
This is important to give us the legal clarity so that we can negotiate again from first principles.
But the environmental campaign group Greenpeace says the move won't give any immediate help to the fishing industry, and it also questioned why the government hadn't acted sooner.
The government has had the power to...
Now, we just got some breaking news to bring you now. In the last few minutes, it's been confirmed that 181 high-rise buildings in 51 local authorities have actually failed safety tests, and that's all, of course, following the Grenfell Tower fire. Meanwhile, a Labour MP who knew one of the victims of that fire says he's worried the man conducting the inquiry into the disaster isn't working closely enough with survivors. David Lammy told Sky's Sophie Ridge that Sir Martin Morbick should reassess his approach, and he also wants him to widen it in terms of reference.
The burnt-out shell of Grenfell Tower is a daily reminder of a community that's been badly failed deep. If there is any suspicion of a cover-up at Grenfell Tower, that will only get worse. Sophie Ridge, Sky News, Tottenham.
Now, also in the last hour, it's been confirmed that illegal subletters in the Grenfell Tower won't be prosecuted if they help identify victims. Well, I'm joined now by Sky's Adele Robinson. Just bring us up to date with this, if you will.
OK, well, the first thing to say is that we can't be sure that illegal subletting was actually going on at Grenfell Tower. There's no hard evidence, but the reality is that it happens up and down the country, and the government have said that there is some anecdotal evidence that it was. And we've heard from the DCLG, the Department for Communities and Local Government, who've said that there will be no prosecution of anyone who comes forward with information on anyone who was in those flats on the night of the fire. And that includes the Tower and Grenfell Walk, so any tenants effectively. And this assurance has come straight from the Community Secretary, Sajid Javid, who's had guidance from the Director of Public Prosecutions. He's effectively said that the public interest is clear, it's in identifying those victims. And the Council, we're told, will respect this guidance as well. We know from being on the ground that people are reluctant to come forward. In the days after the tragedy, people were worried about their immigration status, and we heard from the police and the government giving assurances in the days afterwards that that simply wouldn't be a factor in their investigation. So the authorities are really just trying to build up a clear picture of exactly how many people died and how many people are missing. But what is an issue on the ground, again, is trust. So people have been raising their thoughts about, they're worried, why is the official number simply 80? Why is it just 80? A lot of people on the ground know, they say that the real death toll is much higher. So that trust is still an issue. We are expecting, of course, the death toll to rise, but before anything can be made official, the authorities and the police still need people to come forward. The other updated information we have is on the cladding and the tests. We now know that 181 high-rise buildings across the country have failed those cladding safety tests in 51 local authority areas. That's, again, a 100% failure rate. And landlords and fire services have been told, and they're taking action.
Huge number. OK, thanks very much for that update there, Adele. Now, the French President Emmanuel Macron says he will work with West African countries to eradicate terrorists, thugs and murderers. He's in Mali meeting the leaders of Burkina Faso, Chad, Mali, Mauritania and Niger, and urged other Western leaders to support the fight against jihadists in the Sahara.
We are united by history, which has had both its good and bad moments.
That are needed to support larger and more effective security forces.
Police are looking for the driver of a sports car which hit pedestrians in South London, killing a 16-year-old girl. Witnesses say the Audi A3 left the road after the driver lost control on the corner on Pixton Way in Croydon at around 1:30 this morning. 6 other teenagers were injured and also taken to hospital. Thousands of protesters are marching in the city of Hamburg against the G20 summit taking place next week. They're calling for more action on issues such as inequality and climate change. Leaders from the world's 20 largest economies will meet from Thursday to Saturday. A rocket launched by China's space program earlier today has been unsuccessful. The rocket, which was designed to lift space stations' components, deep space probes and communications satellites into orbit, was built to carry up to 25 tons. Further investigations will now be carried out into what caused the failure. This is Sky News. Coming up in the sport. Welcome back. You're watching Sky News. Let's take a look at the sport now, shall we?
This sports bulletin is brought to you by Vitality. Get healthy, get rewarded.
Good afternoon. A boost for the British and Irish Lions. Flanker Sean O'Brien has been cleared to play in next weekend's deciding test in Auckland.
Vitality. Get healthy, get rewarded.
Well, it's been a beautiful day out there. Let's see if it's set to continue.
Whatever the weather, enjoy your holiday. Multitrip.com Travel Insurance, proud sponsors of Sky News Weather.
Brighter conditions will extend across Britain on Monday with just a scattering of showers, but it will turn pretty cloudy and wet across Northern Ireland and the Republic. Ahead of that, England and Wales will have a mostly dry and sunny day into Sunday afternoon. It'll be cloudier elsewhere with showers for Scotland and Western Ireland. Throughout the evening and overnight, bands of showery rain will spread southeastwards from Scotland, Northern Ireland and Ireland into northern England and Wales. It'll be mainly dry elsewhere. England and Wales will have a cloudy start to Monday with outbreaks of rain, mainly in the west. Elsewhere, it will be pretty bright with showers in the northwest. The brighter conditions will extend south.
Multitrip.com Travel Insurance, proud sponsors of Sky News Weather.
This is Sky News. Coming up. Do Donald Trump's tweets make him unpresidential? We'll have all the latest after the break. The top stories on Sky News. Theresa May is facing renewed pressure after Environment Secretary Michael Gove became the latest cabinet minister to bring an end to the public sector pay gap. The UK is to withdraw from a fishing agreement with 5 other European countries ahead of Brexit talks. And any people who've illegally subletted flats in the Grenfell Tower will escape prosecution if they help to identify victims. Now, Donald Trump has taken his fight with the media to a new level. He's tweeted a mock video that shows him wrestling with a person who has the CNN logo superimposed onto his head. The president's seen tackling the man to the ground before pummeling him as he lies on the floor next to a wrestling ring. Now, the video is actually from a 2007 World Wrestling Entertainment event, but it's not actually clear who's edited it. And I should say the president has today continued to defend his use of social media and criticise people who say his controversial tweets are not presidential. Well, I'm joined now from New Jersey via Skype by Cathy Young, a columnist for Newsday. And Cathy, thanks very much for joining us. First of all, your reaction to that clip that he's posted in the last couple of hours.
Yes, I'm actually kind of speechless, but I guess that's that will not do since we're discussing this. It's just amazing that this is what we're talking about, and there is this idea that some Trump supporters have that this is all part of some grand strategy to, distract the media from discussing whatever else he's doing. I'm not even sure that that's the case. I really do think that we're seeing this sort of unrestrained id that is spilling out all over Twitter, and it is really very troubling.
I have to say, I mean, he said he's modern presidential. Is he presidential, or is he unprofessional?
I think this is really, I would say that this is a lot of people have said that this is beneath the dignity of the office, which is kind of self-evident. But then, of course, a lot of the ways in which he's behaved are beneath the dignity of the office. So I think it's really almost too late to talk about that. I've seen some concerns on Twitter that the imagery in this tweet, in this video specifically, is basically condoning the use of violence for the media. I don't even know if I would say that. I mean, it's a little too farcical to kind of take seriously as a call for violence, in my view. I think this is more kind of getting down into the mud, and this is kind of what we've seen in the past few days. So this is just, I don't know, this is basically a kind of farce playing out from the White House. And I certainly haven't seen or experienced anything quite like this before. I don't know whether to call it a kind of White House reality show, which of course used to be Mr. Trump's field of endeavor for quite a while, or what, but it's certainly unprecedented.
So do you think he should stop using social media, and of course Twitter in particular?
If we're talking about what he can do to be presidential, I think he should. I mean, he's clearly not capable at this point of using it in a kind of presidential manner. He's not going to stop using it, though. So, I mean, we can say that he should. I think a lot of his supporters say that he should, even if you look at the polls and, people who are his fans. Most of them at this point seem to think that it's detracting from his agenda.
But some might say it helps him to identify with people. Maybe not this particular tweet, but in general, it gets him closer to the people, no?
I think there is a subset of his fans who really do identify with this, who think that, they want him to be a fighter, and to take on the media, which they perceive as this, elite, corrupt institution. And, there are a lot of things to criticize the media for. I don't think this is really media criticism per se. So, I mean, I think some of them see it as entertainment. I'm sure there are people who see this as a positive. But, I think certainly anyone who is concerned about the health of the political process needs to be concerned about this.
Okay, Cathy Young, thanks very much from New Jersey there. Appreciate your time.
All right.
Well, now it's time for Sky's weekly technology show. Here's Swipe with Alex Morgan.
Bringing the latest technology to your home. The Swipe Report on Sky News is sponsored by Currys PC World and Philips Hue.
Month on a 12-month contract.
There are calls for towns and cities across the UK to install drinking water fountains in a bid to cut down on the millions of plastic bottles that are thrown away every single year. I went to meet campaigners in Bristol who've taken things into their own hands, setting up a network of refilling points across the city. Introduced in 1859, this is London's oldest drinking fountain. It was unveiled by the Quaker Sam Gurney in a bid to wean people off alcohol in the 19th century.
He was really interested in temperance. He really wanted to keep people away from the public house. So providing free water was obviously one of the ways that they thought they could achieve that.
But nowadays it's hoped water fountains will instead help wean people off plastic water bottles. This one was unveiled in 2010 to do just that. Since the 1980s, water fountains have undoubtedly been in decline because adverts like this started to promote bottled water.
We've had a real growth in the bottled water market in this country. There was the real fitness culture, aerobics. We had Jane Fonda's workouts selling masses of copies in 1982 and people wanting to be lycra clad and swigging bottles of water and getting the body beautiful.
But in Bristol, the water fountain is now making a comeback. The aim is to cut back on our plastic use. And here there are calls for local businesses to sponsor drinking fountains across the city. Bristol is now a refillable city. Hundreds of bars and cafes allow people here to fill up for free.
The idea behind Refill is to have nice friendly stickers and posters on windows of cafes, which encourages people to come in and feel comfortable about coming in and saying, hi, do you mind if I fill this up? So we've got over 200 refill stations in Bristol and people have really got behind it.
In their heyday, drinking fountains were well used across the UK. In fact, their popularity encouraged other countries, like the United States, to also adopt them. And it's hoped a revival in big cities such as Bristol could now help cut back on the millions of plastic bottles that make their way into our rivers and oceans every year. Rebecca Williams, Sky News. Now, Sky News launched its ocean rescue campaign earlier on this year, aimed at reducing the amount of plastic waste that ends up in our world's seas. Do your bit to protect our oceans and swap our single-use plastic from your life. Learn more and join in with all of that and our campaign at skyoceanrescue.com and share your stories using the hashtag #OceanHero. Let's get a check on the sport now.
Hello again. The British and Irish Lions have been handed a boost with the news flanker Sean O'Brien has been cleared to play in next weekend's deciding test in Auckland. And build up to the deciding Lions test over on Sky Sports News HQ. We're back a little later.
OK, thanks very much, Starmesh. You're watching Sky News. Of course, coming up is the end of austerity on the horizon. All that and more coming up after the break.